Hello and welcome to Champ Select, your go-to competitive Legends of Runeterra podcast. I'm Alex. Joining me are my two co-hosts, Noble.
Hi.
And Hugh.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about, it's close to the end of the season, so we're going to be giving a little bit of a check-in as to what we've been playing at the start of this patch, how our climb is going. We're going to talk about how Aphelios has landed and shaken up the meta. And then we're going to get into, approaching the end of the season, a lot of people are really trying to hone in and analyze matchups and improve at the game specifically. So we're going to spend a good chunk of time talking about how to improve as a player, like you and yourself, like how you're supposed to look at the games and focus on creating a plan for yourself to improve, which I think is going to be a pretty interesting subject. But with that, I think let's get into what have we all been playing. Aphelios has been live for a little over a week now for all of us. And I mean, needless to say, he's very good. He's really fun to play. What have you guys' favorite Aphelios decks been?
The one in Lab of Legends. That is what I've been playing. Probably at least half of my games over the last week have been that. When the patch dropped, I played a couple games of ranked, and I was just trying out like various brews and like some things that I unwisely made up myself, and I I lost like 3 or 4 games worth of LP and Masters, and now I'm hovering like right around 197, like well out of top 100, but still in top like 300, I think. And so I just like don't really want to play Masters because I don't want to have to, because I'm definitely qualified for the seasonal, and I don't want to have to play more
seasonal LP mark. Yeah,
and so I just want to like make sure I'm just gonna practice.
A lot of people
are 1v1s.
A lot of people are in that situation right now, and it kind of sucks. Being like, well, I guess I'm not gonna play anymore. Like, I don't know. I guess I wish that there was like a better solution to that. But
it's that same
hard,
thing.
Though, that same thing exists in pretty much every online card game for the same reason. So
if your position degraded more, like if you lost LP over time and maybe lost a little less for losses,
there are games
something,
where if you're at the high, if you're in the equivalent of Masters in other games, your LP does actually degrade if you stop playing for an amount of time.
Yeah, and that might be nice, but also like, this is something I'm going to talk about for our general topic, but like, you don't need to play every day. Like, this is your hobby. So like, I would kind of hate it if it was you got punished for taking a couple days off Legends or Runeterra.
Oh yeah, I don't think that's the answer, to be clear.
I definitely don't like that. But I have been playing a ton of Lab, and I actually like really don't play a lot of labs. Like, I don't play a lot of things that aren't just ranked. Like, my most experimental format is like copying Twitter deck lists and playing some Singleton, or like I've brewed a couple Singleton decks. I think I probably Prime Gloried with one of them or whatever. But and it's just been really fun. I think that the Lab of Legends is a cool enough format that it could honestly be an entire game by itself. Like, just the process of drafting a deck and then getting like passives that affect your cards, and then basically upgrading particular cards leads to like these really cool decks that are different every time. And I just think it's super fun. I ended up with one where I was like, whenever I summoned a 1-cost ally, it was getting +2/+2. And at the start of my turn, I summoned a Poro that was a 3/3. And then I played a Prowling Cutthroat that was a 3/3 elusive, fearsome, and scout.
Oh, dear
and
Lord.
then I was just like,
so
getting
dead.
to absolutely, just get to, play against AIs. And I think that deck would be cool to play against someone else's deck that was similarly busted and see what happens.
Yeah. All right. How about you, Hugh?
So my original plan, I hit 127 LP like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, I shouldn't play ladder anymore. Like, I should probably just sit here.
See, this is 2 weeks out. I hate that that's how it works.
Yeah, no. And then I got like really antsy, and I was like, well, this is terrible. I hate not playing ranked. And so I just like, I'll play a couple games. And then that was a mistake.
I feel it. That's a good look.
It's just always a mistake. And I lost 3, and I was like, okay, well, I'm at like 70 LP now. It's fine. I'll just like win 4 and then be back. 0 LP later.
Zero LP later.
By that you mean -70 LP later.
No, I mean like I'm now at 0 in this story. Yeah,
sure.
exactly. This was before Aphelios happened, by the way, and then Aphelios happened. So it was like a sort of a blessing in disguise because I didn't have anything to lose. So I just sort of like made some Aphelios decks, and they actually did all right. They weren't good. Let's be clear.
Okay,
they were
playable.
They were winning out of the. So I made 3 decks. I played 4 games with each of them and went 50-50 on all 3 decks.
And that loses you LP. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, when you're
No,
at 0,
I wasn't.
it's
Oh, this is at
it's
0. This
all
was at
a wash.
0.
This
Oh,
is 0. I wasn't gaining. I mean, it was maybe I was gaining LP. I don't remember. Anyway, I decided to stop playing bad decks, and then I just hopped right back on TF Fizz, and then I went 10-2, and now I'm at 137, and I'm gonna stay there.
Yeah, so
Because-
you're at the no more ranked as well.
Pretty much. I also tried out the lab. So normally I hate lab. I've kind of always hated labs. It's just not even remotely what I look for in this game.
Mm-hmm.
No part of it has been fun for me. And weirdly enough, in particular, the background music for Quick Draw, makes me.
I noticed the same thing. I actually thought the exact same thing.
it is infuriating.
So antsy. Yeah,
I hate
it's
it.
just awful.
It's not bad.
No,
It's not.
it just like tinges in the back of your head.
It's like Chinese water torture in music. Like it's just like someone. It's like
it's
you ever
really
see that
horrid.
YouTube video where a guy is following another guy around and just tapping with a spoon all the time?
be
Like, he just doesn't stop
It'd be like some guy just following you around, constantly honking.
or something. Just something equally infuriating.
Yeah.
I hated it. Anyway, I tried out the new lab because everyone, both the competitive and the normal subreddit were going off about it. Our Discord was going off about it. I was like, this sounds fun. I didn't know what it was, and I played it. And I was like, oh my god, this is
Dungeon Run.
Dungeon
It's
Run
Dungeon
from
Run
Hearthstone.
from Hearthstone. Yeah, it's great.
And it's about damn time that they made this.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
Dungeon Run is the only part of Hearthstone I like anymore. Not that I really have looked back at it since it's been like 2 or 3 years.
Is this what you're
It's been
talking
it's been a while.
I will break that phone.
Well, I was going to open this game and then not play it, but I definitely got a 3-mana Aurelion Soul, so we're playing this one out.
Okay.
On the podcast. I'll keep you all updated.
Yeah,
it
okay,
was
that's
just
good.
for the music, but here we are.
Anyway, this is an excellent PvE lab. It's just a great.
It's really fun.
It's a great game mode.
just
It's
really
amazing.
fun,
I love
yeah.
it. And they should. What I think, if they're going to further explore this, I'd really like to see like sort of a campaign almost, like where they sort of like, instead
would
of just
be
sort
really
of
cool,
these
yeah.
faceless sort of encounters you get an actual like story thing where you like come across
Yeah, and they could
characters that we
definitely
know
do
in the
it,
lore,
yeah.
and like they could do all sorts of stuff with this.
It wouldn't even have to be fully animated or anything. They could do it in like a
Well, you could
Japanese
just do voice
click
lines.
through,
Yeah.
click through style
Yeah,
with
it'd be
just
super
pictures
cool.
or whatever.
My
That would be
opponent
cool.
had a 0-mana stress testing, which might be better than the Aurelion Soul. I'm not going to lie. Just going to keep their whole hand. Oh, they surrendered. All right.
Good work, Noble.
Cool.
They surrendered to the Aurelion Soul.
Yeah. Yeah, they did surrender to
Sounds
the Aurelion
about
Soul.
So for me, so at right now I have 118 LP in Masters.
Ooh, yeah.
So
One
I think
more
I
win.
need to play one more.
You need to play one
probably.
more.
No,
Definitely.
you live on the edge, my
So
friend.
I'll inevitably
119 was the cutoff last season. So.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
definitely
So I'll inevitably lose and be stuck at 0 for the rest of all time. But until then, it's only one more win, so that's nice. I've been playing quite a bit of Aphelios nonsense, pretty much just like going around between like I like play a couple games, check Twitter. Oh, there's another new Aphelios list. This is the best deck now. Okay, like play 2 games, go back to Twitter. There's another new best deck Aphelios deck. Like like you get one about like every 20 minutes nowadays.
Aphelios nonsense is a pretty good description of the current state of the ladder.
yeah. So
It is so bad that the meta report that came out yesterday doesn't have an Aphelios deck on it because they're all so different.
I was gonna say that I had of the 13 ladder games I played to get back to with Burblefish specifically, not the Aphelios garbage games I played. Of the 13 games I played with that deck to hit 137, I played 7 games against Zombie Anivia.
yeah, I've heard that is.
Did you see the meta report?
I did. Oh, I did. And
I just want to know how you play that many games, Hugh. That you're like 15% of the whole meta. How did you manage to corrupt? How did you manage to play so much Zombie Anivia? I thought it was only you.
I don't know why everyone's playing. I didn't drop a single game to it. It's not like the deck isn't suddenly amazing with Gluttony existing because people
Yeah.
seem to think that it is, and Maybe
It seems-
maybe I'm missing something. Maybe like
It seems like it might have a place to me in a best of 3 lineup.
Oh, absolutely.
Which maybe is a reason why people are playing it right now, because a lot of people are just like trying to get practice in, especially the people who are like above the cutoff.
Well, the
in
deck's just good
Masters,
against
but
Burblefish.
It also
I,
is just
I was playing
pretty good against
I'm
Burblefish.
7-0 against it with Burblefish. That's the thing, though.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Weird.
A lot of people thought that matchup was just like, if you're playing Burblefish, you should just concede, which is obviously not true.
I do actually think it's
it was
pretty
that
good
yeah.
for Anivia on paper. But
On paper, yes, but then you realize that they get to play one thing per turn, and you get to play 7. And then it's like, well, okay, you played your Anivia, and here are my 5/4/2 elusives.
yeah, those are the games that you definitely win on that side. I don't know. I played the Zombie Anivia deck for like not that long, but I probably played like 5 or 6 games with it a couple weeks ago, maybe last week, and I think I like 2-0'd Burblefish and it was pretty easy, but I could definitely see games where it can line up very poorly and you just like get way out tempoed pretty easily.
Yeah, that's the way you beat it. You have to prey on their like weak turns where they tapped out for a big thing and suddenly
Cast
you're
the card Anivia.
casting the card Anivia is the big swing. You got to like the moment they cast Anivia, you're on a very, very strict timer. You cannot let it get to like turn 9.
Especially
Oh,
with
yeah.
Gluttony, because it's just
Yeah, exactly.
and
And
it's a self-fulfilling
Well, I guess
prophecy.
it's not until turn 10.
exactly. And that's the thing that I don't get is that Gluttony doesn't make the deck that much better in my experience, because you still just congratulations, you paid 3 extra mana for just Anivia again.
Yeah, you get an extra copy, but it doesn't actually. I don't know. The hardest part is getting the first copy, but I guess it is pretty nice to be able to like Gluttony your Anivia like in response to a like.
Oh,
fallen
that's super
comet or
nice. But I
something.
see maybe it's just because I'm coming up against people who aren't that great, but everyone's doing it proactively. They just like slam Anivia, and I like either click pass or play a thing, and then they just Gluttony. I'm like, why?
Yeah,
You just didn't need to do that.
It's not really accomplishing that much.
Unless you're in a matchup where you're really, really afraid of Obliterate, then like, who cares?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, anyway, I mean the deck is really sweet, so I guess I can't blame anyone for playing it. It's very.
Oh yeah,
fun,
no, I
so-
love the deck. It's just
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that
For those who haven't heard, there was the reason we're talking about that is because there was a recent meta report from, oh gosh, I found it was linked in our Discord, so I don't actually know who it was from on Twitter, but there's the same group that puts these out all the time. They're totally awesome. And 12% of the metagame was Zombie Anivia, followed by 10% Fiora Shen, 9% Lisa and Zoe, 8% TF Fizz, 8% Discard Aggro, 5% Pirate Burn, 4% Draven Ezreal. That deck has apparently really fallen off. 4% TF Gohard and 4% Nightfall Aggro. And then like 35% of the meta being other, but which I can only assume is
a lot of
all
Aphelios.
Aphelios.
Yeah.
Well, because Targon is one of the most popular regions at 20%, and then 67% of those decks are Aphelios. And of the decks that I just listed, only one is Targon. So that must mean that of the remaining decks, a large, like probably, 40+%, 50+% of them are Targon, and like 40% of those, 60% of those are Aphelios. So
decks.
there's this just giant 35% other that is, I think, almost entirely Aphelios or new cards like Riven, or not Riven not being new, but Riven or Victor,
Yeah,
new brews with
I think
buffs.
so.
Yeah.
And I
Demacia
do
is
want to talk
non-existent, again, by the way.
about Aphelios in particular. So Aphelios, I don't think anybody is quite sure what his best shell is yet. I think that a lot of people have been experimenting with slightly different variations of things, especially because they're trying to find like an Aphelios deck and a Zoe deck or whatever for the seasonal. So there's been a lot of experimenting with Aphelios, and the cards that have really come to the top is like Aphelios himself has just been shining. He's been really, really good. A lot of people think that he's like one of the best cards in the game. I saw a tweet that was where somebody compared Aphelios' release in Legends of Runeterra to being more broken than Aphelios' release in League of Legends.
That's
which was
that's a high
quite
compliment.
the statement.
I think one, card game players have a tendency for hyperbole, and also
Always. Yeah.
people are already talking
literally always.
people are already talking
exactly.
about buffs, or are already talking about nerfs. Like, he'd be fine if he was a 2/3. They're probably gonna make him a 3/2. Like, they're gonna probably do this or this, and it's like, this card has been out for like a week. Like, he's very, very powerful, but I mean, I had someone tell me on day 2 of Cosmic Creations that Victor was the new best champion in the game, and like, that obviously didn't really pan out.
Yeah.
Like, we can take a little time
take
here.
take a deep breath.
Speaking of Victor, like, I've seen Aphelios paired with Twisted Fate, Zoe, Lee Sin, Victor. I think I might have even seen it with Riven.
Victor
No, I
is the
didn't
most
do
common
that
one
with
I've
that.
come across on ladder.
Yeah.
And it seems to be the best so far that I've seen.
I've won a lot of unranked games with big Victors.
Yeah,
Victor
it's
Yeah, that deck seems good.
the deck feels good. That's about. I mean,
Another
I haven't played a ton of games on it, but that's about all.
Another thing I want to highlight is his champ spell. It's called like Glimpse of Moonlight.
Gifts from Beyond?
Gifts from Beyond. I was way off.
Gifts from the Moonlight, something like that.
It gives you a gun.
Yeah.
Gifts.
It's 2 mana burst, get a gun.
Moon gun. Moon gun spell.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about this, and I was like, actually, this isn't that as bad of a card as it looks on first, because if you just get Calibrum, the 3 damage to a follower, like, you just played Aftershock, but it was 2 spells.
To trigger
It triggers Nightfall or Aphelios stuff, and way more versatile than that because it can be a follower. You could have paid 3 spell mana and 1 for a follower from your deck, and if you can make that be a very specific follower if you only put that 2 cost in your deck. And, you know, it can also do Gravitum, which is insane in some spots.
Yeah, they're just really good. Like, the big piece that I think we missed was being able to Crescendum Boxtopus. That's a big piece for the, like, TF decks or the ones that aren't playing Victor. Is like, that's a huge part of their game plan, is that, like, making a Aphelios that is going to be bringing in all these huge challenger things that are basically just going to eat aggro decks alive, and then he's going to power through with his mid-range card draw into the
way
late
better than
game.
the Sparkle Flies I've been getting. I need to change my deck list.
Yeah, so that's been pretty powerful in that variant, and obviously in the Victor deck, then all of the augment things are getting much bigger. Yeah, which is really powerful. And also the Veiled Temple has been really good. That card's been like performing really well.
Nailed it.
Just, like, yeah,
Maybe we
absolutely.
should stop listening to Alex.
It's really good.
And just believe everything
Yeah,
he
it's good.
says. Burblefish.
Yeah.
The
It's
Temple. I don't know, man.
The temple's been really good. It just it kind of just makes it all like fit together. You know, I was a little skeptical if you would really want the mana for like your essentially third spell, in each turn, but yeah, you really do. It turns out when you're just churning through these moon weapons with Aphelios, like the Veiled Temple often just says like every turn you get to play your moon weapon for free, and that just ends up being a lot of tempo actually, because the moon weapons are usually provide a lot of tempo. So
Yeah, and I think that, which is something that I talked about when we were talking about the thing that kind of helped sell me on it, was that you're cheating a little bit in that you can spend 7 non-spell mana on turns, but they could only spend 5, or 2. You just have 2 more mana that you can spend, and that is kind of the biggest inherent break of this game's mana system that we've seen so far. Like, more than ramp, it lets you really play a lot of spells in a turn.
Yeah, and I was also skeptical that you would be able to really abuse that for that many turns. Like, you would just run out of cards eventually, but yeah,
Not
that
when
doesn't
gems
happen.
exist.
That also
That
doesn't
happen.
really happen.
Yeah,
in this game.
you do not run out of cards.
Especially
That
with
is not a problem.
Victor and Aphelios is like 3 manas of spells a turn. The same is true if you have a Ballistic Bot in play, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you just don't run out of
You
cards.
just don't. Yep.
So, the Veiled Temple has been really good, and the +1/+1s are pretty much always relevant too. I mean, there's a lot of boards that I've seen like random 10 power quick attack overwhelm Aphelioses or whatever, just because the Veiled Temple's been buffing it, and then you Infernum and just kill people out of nowhere.
Yep.
Totally.
So,
And I have had far more Legends of Runeterra games come down to who has the most, who uses their mana most effectively, as opposed to who has the most cards. I get in like quote unquote top deck wars so infrequently. It's only in like some Expedition games, though it does happen a lot more in Expedition, or like Ezreal Draven mirrors.
yeah, it happens a lot in those.
And the TF Burblefish mirrors can happen, but you can also just snowball, but stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see where people settle on Aphelios. I expect probably by next week people are going to start agreeing on what the best Aphelios deck is, and I'm curious to see if that like is an Aphelios Zoe deck or like an Aphelios Lee deck that's then gonna, or like an Aphelios TF deck or whatever, that's going to force people to take a different direction if they want to split those champions up for the seasonal tournament, which I think could be really interesting if there ends up being a lot of crossovers. So I'm excited to see that. But I think we should move on to improving as a player, just as a whole. So let's start, I think, from the start. Like when you pick up a new game. So let's say you just came into Legends of Runeterra, if you can put yourself back a year ago or whatever. How do you immediately start improving? And can you apply those concepts like of learning a game, like the rules and the fundamentals of it, to then learning a game in a higher way? And is there a like easy correlation there, or do people just end up innately kind of like falling off and getting back into falling back into old habits or whatever? That's what I'm really curious about, because like when you get into a game, you're going to be thinking about the interactions, and like you get surprised by these cool things that come up, and you're thinking about the game in a fundamental like interaction based way. And for me, whenever I start to get comfortable with a game, I tend to find myself like falling out of that like, what happens if I were to do blank mindset, because you start to develop patterns, right? And for me, that means that I result in like just making sort of autopilot plays down the line where I'm not considering my other options because I haven't thought about the other options yet. And it also, I notice it when I like play a new deck where I like see a new synergy I hadn't seen before. I'm like, oh, this is really cool or whatever. And then Noah will be like, yeah, you haven't been doing this. And I'm like, no, I hadn't been doing this. Like sometimes you just miss things when you like are playing a deck. Like you just, for example, I think when I was playing the Feel the Rush deck, I remember talking to Noble and he was like, there was like a Kindly Tavern Keeper in my hand and 3 mana, and I just didn't play it. And he was like, why aren't you just playing the Kindly Tavern Keeper? I'm like, I don't know, I can find more value. And he's like, you're just going to be able to block like more than 3 damage with it. Like it's basically just going to be a wash and you'll spend all the mana. And for some reason, like it was really obvious, but I just like, it was like my 4th game with the deck and I just didn't even think about it. I was like, yeah, obviously that's way better. Of course. Like I came from Expedition or whatever, where I just like never wanted to do it because I'd always have other things to do, but like you just don't have anything else to do.
Playing
with
a
that deck
Kindly Tavern Keeper when you're at 20 like feels weird and bad, but it's pretty much always the right
you
thing
just,
to
you
do.
just
on
trade just
three.
a 3/3 that
It
was hitting you for
feels
3.
bad,
Yeah.
but it's
You
like
did the thing.
Yeah, it
Congrats.
was really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like I don't know, I always struggle with actually having the time to like think about every single option that I have to go through.
And I think that's a great point, is that contextually in a particular deck, the way you use cards can change. Like you said, like in an Expedition game, you wouldn't have played the Tavern Keeper there or whatever.
Yeah, because I would have wanted to save it to heal a minion or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
That was my
how
like
that can-
pattern recognition, was like, I want to save this to heal a minion for the war, but that just didn't matter at all.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, totally. And how that can kind of throw you off. So going back to the start of your question, like what is it like when I learn a new game? I think the most important thing is I start by kind of drawing parallels to other games. So for Legends of Runeterra, it was like, okay, so slow speeds are, I was thinking about Magic, and it's like, okay, so slow spells are sorceries and fast spells are instants and burst spells are split second. That's broken. That was the first thing that I was like, there are spells you can't interact with. That is insane. All my creatures have haste and vigilance.
Yeah,
Like,
this is all crazy.
yeah,
Everything's so powerful.
this is wild. And then the way the turn structures work and damage being permanent just like kind of upends all of that, and makes the comparisons not really that good. But that is kind of how I begin approaching something. So we've talked about the fact that we do game design before, but that's something similar when we're designing a new game system. I recently was like, okay, so this is the Legends of Runeterra priority system, but we're kind of playing Magic the Gathering Commander, and there's like a little bit of Pokemon in here, and we just kind of like
you draw the
draw
the parallels, and you see all the connections to things, which innately helps you like understand the game on a fundamental level when you're starting to play it. And so I think when you start to get the high levels of each game is when you start to disassociate those parallels and start to think through them. At least That's what I found is when you stop comparing like a card to like this, but 3 more mana in Magic, or like, Murder is 7 mana in Legends of Runeterra and called Vengeance or whatever. When you like disassociate those things, I really find myself finding way more options for new things. And so for me, I think the best way I focus on learning is just like when you're playing a game, I just think about using cards in weird ways, and it helps me like try to disassociate Murder with Vengeance or whatever, and associate Vengeance with the cool things I can do with Vengeance.
Yeah.
And then you just end up finding random weird cool things that you can do, or weird plays that are slightly more efficient that you wouldn't have thought of before. Or sometimes you'll just have a realization like, oh, wait a second, like, you can like if then it, right? Like if I play this Kindly Tavern Keeper, then I'll trade with the 3/3, so I won't have to have taken the 3 damage and save the 3 mana or whatever, essentially. So I find those to be really effective. Hugh, I know you wanted to say stuff about learning in general. I don't know if it's been parallel to what we've been talking about, but
yeah, you sort of went in a different direction than I was expecting the question to go.
I think it's a really broad question, and I wanted to start at like the very base, but I think there's
just to really quickly touch on what you brought up. When I'm learning a new game, all I do is I just walk in and like I do draw parallels, because that's just you can't not. It's involuntary. You can't sit there and be like, I'm gonna turn my brain off to every game I've ever played and just play this one. Like that doesn't work.
And it would make you worse. Like it's good to understand things like card advantage and tempo when you're starting a new game.
Yeah, exactly. And there's things that help. So that's when you're starting out, it helps. Anyway, I just sort of do things with no particular reasoning behind them, and I just
see how it goes.
Yeah, just see how it goes. I just want to experience the game. The biggest thing I prioritize when I'm learning a new game is just learning the name and effect of every card. Like in this game, I just wanted to know what everything did, period. I wanted to look at the entire card list and have every single card in my head known to me, so that I could technically play around everything, but like practically I know that that's not going to end up being the case. But
and then you can think about what cool sweet decks you want to build.
Yeah, it's like a completionist thing for me. I need to know. But that, as far as like the thing you said about finding neat interactions and thinking about how cards interact differently, is much less important. I think that's a very that's far down the line for improvement. I think that's the kind of improvement you're looking for after you've already hit the higher levels of play.
Interesting.
Because I think the most fundamental thing that I think holds people back is a lack of accountability. And what I mean by that is when people say, you'll frequently see people say something like, this deck is broken, this card is broken.
I hate Lee Sin.
Right. Like this is like,
what a stupid champion.
something along the lines of saying a reason why they lost the game that isn't, I made a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely.
That like people so often find reasons why they've failed at something to make it not their fault. And obviously, yes, there are tons and tons of situations where you couldn't have completely planned for everything. Something happened, like, yeah, they top deck the perfect card at the perfect time. Like that absolutely happens, but you can't change that ever. Like people fixate on things that happen that they couldn't have affected, and they just frequently don't think about the things they needed to do, like the ways they could have played differently
it or dealt with it.
It doesn't even have to be playing around it. It could have been like, it could have been as simple as like, why did you play this card over this card 2 turns ago? Or like, what, like, is this play you made better than this other play you could have made? Were you thinking about that?
Yeah, and the important like distinction, I think, is not losing to get excited sometimes, right? Like, it's not that you lost to get excited. It's whether or not you thought about if you were going to lose to get excited. If you consciously made the decision that like, I'm not going to be able to get excited this game, and so I took this decision instead, regardless of whether or not other people agree with that choice. Like, it's very important that you did think about that, right?
Yeah.
And you can there's additional accountability on whether or not that choice is correct, but like you need to hold yourself accountable to at least think about it, right? Like if you're thinking about these things, then that's the first step towards improvement.
Yeah, and also on an even like lower, more base level, the fixation people have with winning in general.
Oh yeah, very much.
Like that's another huge problem, is that people think that because they're winning games, that means they're improving.
Yeah,
and that's not the case.
Or every game that you win, you played better than your opponent.
Exactly.
Or that's not true either.
Or that because you won the game, you don't need to think about it and think about what you did. Be like, oh, I messed up in that last turn, but it didn't matter. I won
because I won anyway.
Yeah. And like, I've definitely been guilty of saying that myself.
Well, I think most people are always like, oh, thank God I won anyway. But there is a very like, at least you at least need to acknowledge that like, okay, I screwed that up and I could have lost. Thankfully it didn't, but like that doesn't need to happen again. We need to make
that's
sure
a very important mentality to have, because some people, instead of saying, oh, thank God I won anyway, they say, oh, look, what I did was right because I won. I thought I made the wrong decision, but it wasn't the wrong decision because I see this victory screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have put a spell on the stack thinking. And then been like, oh, I'm dead if they have, I put the atrocity on the stack and been like, oh, I should have played around Get Excited, and they don't have it. And I'm like, oh, thank God. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't have played around Get Excited. Yeah. I really should have atrocity'd my 5-5 instead of my 5-1. Like,
it will lose you a game an amount of the time, a percentage of the time.
And I just want to say, like, I firmly believe that if you're playing a reasonably powerful deck, that 90% of the ladder games that you play are winnable if you play perfectly.
Probably about
I think that there's a very, very small percentage of games. And this is part of what's so great about Legends of Runeterra. Not only are there tons of viable decks, and there are many behind the scenes art, lore, way they release cards, monetization, things that are great about Legends of Runeterra, there is just so much less. I would be shocked if you could win 90% of the Magic the Gathering games you played. But for Legends of Runeterra, I think that it is absolutely, I don't think there's probably very few people with an actual 90% win rate.
I'm sure
but I think that 90% of the games that you play, you could have won.
There was a line.
Yeah, there was a line.
And maybe it was a 1 in 1,000 line, and you had to see 10 turns in advance with information you couldn't have had, but there was a line.
And maybe sometimes those lines are just bad and you should never take them because you'd be more likely to win with another line.
And also, like,
whatever, still.
But that's not true. You're not going to win 90% of the Legends of Runeterra games you play if your opponent is also playing as well as that, right?
Absolutely.
Like, I think that if you were just like on top of your game, made all the right decisions, you'd win 90% of your games. But of course, as soon as that is also true for your opponent, it goes back to around 50%.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do think that you should be constantly thinking. And for me as a card game player, this is what spawned this question. Is me and Alex were talking about what we wanted the question for this podcast to be and what we wanted to talk about. And we talked a little bit about why we started this podcast and what we like about it and what we hope people get out of it, and maybe what we hope distinguishes us from other content, and just being that it's about the competitive mindset, which for me
it's always focused on improving.
Yeah, really. It's about improving. It's not about winning.
Absolutely,
is for me. It's a growing experience. It's learning more things about this game that I really like. That does translate into winning this game, which is a dopamine hit or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the fun part about it. But it almost feels like. This is okay. Please don't take this example too literally, but like it feels to me a little bit like, when you're playing these Legends of Runeterra games with the intention to improve, it's kind of like, trying to like go to the gym for like football or like basketball or whatever. Like you're putting in the work so that you're eventually going to be better, or that, and when the seasonal tournament happens, like, okay, this is game day. I've practiced for this. I've prepared for this. I'm ready for this. Right? Like you are training yourself, you're training your body to improve at something. And yes, you're training your mind instead of like, physically lifting weights or whatever. You're, slamming wiggly burblefish for 0 mana, or, gluttoning your Anivias away. But, as long as you're thinking, right, like, you can't go on autopilot while lifting weights, right? Like your body is always going to get the benefit because you always have to do the thing. But with games, and especially with card games, it's really easy to turn on a TV show, or even if you don't have anything else on, like just like get zoned into the music or whatever, and kind of click your brain off and just see the card, look at your mana cost, drag the card into play, don't really think about it too much. And that's the hard part, because if you spent, like how many hours have we spent playing Legends of Runeterra? Like
1,000.
Like thousand, right? Like if we spent all that time, running or at the gym or whatever, we'd be absolutely shredded, right? But you can turn your brain
swole
off.
Squirrels.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd be yoked.
Wow.
But you can turn your brain off in card games, and it happens more than you think. It's probably, a lot of the time you have to turn it on like multiple times a game, where you catch yourself on autopilot and then turn it back on, right? And so you end up improving at, I think, a slower rate if you aren't really conscious about it.
And it's okay to like just want to play ranked on your phone and not care that much about it, or play labs, or play unranked, or
absolutely.
test a deck.
This doesn't mean that you have to be a competitive player, but I think the competitive mindset that's ingrained in at least all of us, and I assume most of our listeners here, is I want to be the best at this, and how do I do that? How do I find that golden road to the path of learning, basically?
And I just want to say, like, if this all sounds kind of silly to you, you're like, dude, this is a card game. I would just like to, like, I absolutely believe the amount of time that I've spent trying to get good at a Legends of Runeterra, Magic the Gathering, and be competitive has absolutely made me a better person. Like, not only like do the things that I learn, like just the process of thinking through something and really analyzing a situation, breaking it down. What's my plan here in this matchup? What things should I play around is a very healthy exercise for your brain. I've also, like, not to get cheesy, but have absolutely, like, one, made many, many very good friends because of our shared hobbies. And second, learned a lot about how I want to live my life. Like, this is a little cheesy, but like, I've gotten very burned out playing Magic tournaments and learned that I needed to, take some self-care and remind myself that the reason that I'm playing them is because I want to have fun and be competitive, and I don't need to stress as much as I'm stressing about them.
Yeah.
And to kind of relax a little bit, learning to accept variance. Sometimes the best part about the trip is most times the best part about the trip is the dinner after.
the after tournament dinner is always excellent.
Yeah. And just like learning to kind of take those swings in stride. And that's been a huge part of, like, games have been a huge part of my life. I've been playing Magic since I was like 5 years old. Like, I've always been like playing some kind of game, and I don't know, I'm very happy.
It's just,
I think it's made me a better, more thoughtful person.
It resonates for sure.
Yeah, especially when part of improving is taking responsibility for the mistakes you made.
Yeah, and
that's
that
just
is
a fundamental part of everyone's life.
The hardest part about it. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be willing to admit that you screwed up and that you needed to do something different, and that's really it. I mean, a lot of people aren't willing to do that.
And the hard part about it is you have to find the balance with admitting that there needed to be a change and admitting that you made a mistake, but not being so hard on yourself that you force yourself, like you're so anxious about it or so stressed about it that you're too afraid to make the mistakes in the first place, right? You need to be honest with yourself, and you need to tell yourself when you made a mistake. But at the end of the day, it is still just a game, right? Like, you're doing this for a hobby, right? Make sure you aren't stressing yourself out about it, and because if you're stressing out about it too, you also aren't going to be learning anything, right?
The saying is accept the things you cannot change, and like work to change the things that you can't accept. And like that tracks for card games. Like, accept that there are games that you're not going to win. That is part of having a good mental, is not getting tilted when there's a game that you never had a chance of winning. And just instead of being like, oh, that deck's so broken, or oh, whatever, being like, I could have played better. I was probably losing that game no matter what. Time to move on to the next game and do my best in that game. And then also, when there is a problem and you do realize it was because of mistake play, also not beating yourself up and moving forward to future games with
where you think
having learned something and like working to correct it.
Yeah, another thing is people. I mentioned the thing about winning before, and people really, 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 when they like pay for coaching or they ask someone for help, they frequently ask the question, how do I win this game? Like, what did I do wrong? Like, how could I have done this differently to win? And like every time I hear that, I'm like, your concern should not be how do I win these games? Your concern should be, how do I play this game better? And the wins will come. The wins will be a byproduct of your improvement. You just need to focus on improving, and that should be your number one goal always, and you will start to win more.
Is absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely true. And when you're sitting down like to play a game, a lot of people set themselves goals or whatever, and goals are good. They're a healthy thing to have. It's important. Almost all humans set themselves goals in card games, in the rest of life, whatever. But it's especially common in card games, especially ones with ladder systems, because it's so easy to be like, I want to be in Masters, I want to be Diamond, etc., whatever, right?
I'm gonna play the day I want to get out of Plat 3.
I want to gain 30 LP today, something even that
exactly,
simple,
whatever it is. And it's important to set goals for yourself because they keep people motivated, right? Like it feels like you just get such a dopamine hit when you like do that thing that you've been wanting to do. Right? Like you just feel good about it. And those are part of the reasons why people keep coming back to card games. But you have to remember that like the end goal is still learning, right? Like you should try to train yourself to get that like same dopamine hit whenever you learn something new about a matchup. You know, if you discover that you should have been playing River Shaper instead of Fiora on turn 3 and the Fiora Shen mirror this whole time or whatever, and you finally do that flowchart or whatever. Which, by the way, you should be. If you finally do that flowchart, and then you're like, "Oh, I get it now." Like that, those are the dopamine hits that I like really crave nowadays. Where I'm like, "Yes, I figured it out. I'm gonna win so many more games now." And that's so many more games. It's like 0.02%, right? Like, I might win like a game more or whatever in the future, just playing a little bit more optimally. But I get like so stoked. I'm never gonna queue into this matchup on ladder anyway because there's a new patch coming out in a week. Like,
every game in which I have both River Shaper and Fiora in my hand on turn 3
in the
Fiora Shen mirror, based on whether or not I have the attack token or not.
And
I will win
sharp
0.2% more of those games. Let's go.
Hype. Yeah, that's sick. And it's like how did I find this information? Oh, like a 5-hour grind session, with my friend. And it's like, this is ridiculous. But like, I don't know. That's what I live for nowadays. It's those like little golden nuggets of information.
Yeah, there's I think the thing I love about this game the most, like the thing that brings me the most joy, is knowing for certain that the reason I won a game is because I played really, really well. There have been so many games, like part of the reason, so last season my favorite deck was Pirates. It's still one of my favorite decks. But one of the reasons I loved that deck so much was because I remember 3 specific games, and I think all 3 games, I said something about it in one of our group chats in Crazy Toxic Hive Mind.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I mentioned
aptly named, by the way.
Yeah, because in all 3 of those games, I won with Pirates into a player who slammed on turn 5 or 6 or whatever, a Radiant Guardian, and got to hit with it no less than 4 times. Like they gained a minimum of 16 life. One specific game, they got 2 Radiant Guardians, and each of them resolved 2 concerting strikes, both of them hitting my creatures.
So they were at 100, yeah.
Yeah, they were at like they gained like 38 life that game. I won that game.
Wow.
Captain Farron's
Farron.
Yeah,
Sounds about right.
Captain Farron is still nonsense.
Would you have won it with only 2 decimates?
No.
All right,
absolutely not.
That's 4
but you know
games
what?
of LP that we can strip from
I looked
you.
at that and like, there's so many people who the moment they see a Radiant Guardian come down, they would click concede. There's even more people who would be like, maybe they'd play it out, but
this matchup sucks. I could never win.
And then what would happen is they see that single combat go on the stack, killing their like
MF.
No, they're checked out. They're checking out. Yeah,
or their Zap Spray Fan. They're like, then they click concede.
This is just, okay, so this is a huge part of mental. And I knew that this was going to end up being another episode about mental. And I loved that previous episode. So great, we did it. I tricked all of you. But a huge part of mental in games is like, people scoop too early in every game that I play. People scooped too early in the Pro Tour that I played.
Oh, yeah, people scoop too early all the
on
time.
Arena. In Masters, people stoop too early in Legends of Runeterra. There are so many games where I've slammed a great 3-drop on turn 3, 4-drop on turn 4, flipped my, this is only really relevant in Magic. And then they click concede, and I look down at my hand of 6 lands, and I'm like, thank God, there was no way I was ever winning this game.
Yeah, there's been so
there's
many
a lot
times-
of turn one Zoe concedes.
Oh, I was just about to say
that's
the amount
the
of last
main
gauntlet,
offender.
last Singleton gauntlet. I got a prime glory.
in Singleton, come
Sorry,
on.
no,
I'm
sorry,
conceding
sorry,
to
not
turn
Singleton
one
Gauntlet,
Zoe
not
and
Singleton
Singleton for
Gauntlet.
sure. That's just embarrassing. How could they always have it?
The not Singleton gauntlet, specifically the best of
sorry.
the tournament
Okay,
gauntlet. Sorry. I was playing a deck that was not at all meta. It was a brew that Noble and I had come up with a long time ago to flip GP as fast as possible.
Oh, I love that deck.
I remember that
Yeah,
bad boy.
and I played it. I was like, you know what? Does this beat Zoe Lee consistently? And turns out probably not if they're good, because we tried that later. But in the gauntlet,
You just mopped them.
so three of the matches I played were they hit turn one Zoe, I play turn one parlay, they turn one concede. that was three of my matches.
Okay,
If you're that person with the Zoe, do not concede.
for the everyone, I want each one of our listeners to know this. If on turn one you play a champion and then they play a removal spell, that 1-for-1 is not the end of the world for
pretty
you.
fine, yeah.
You're like, oh, I mean, I was probably winning this game if so he lived, but it's different. So now we have to play a normal game that I still have the exact same chance of winning that I had before.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. A lot of that happens.
I think, yeah. When I was playing Zoe Lee, like I think I must have gotten at least in my history playing Zoe, I think I have gotten at least 10 turn one Zoe insta concedes.
Wait, actually?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
It happens
100%.
a lot.
Yes, happens so often. Also, I mean, and it's ridiculous. That's the most common one because it's a really like it feels
It's also
awful.
just a sick meme. Like
It is.
I imagine that most of the time that happens, like people are like there with their friends or like, check out this cool game, and it's like turn one Zoe, and they're like, maybe the next one. Trust me, it's good.
And there's so many of those, that exact scenario. Like turn one Zoe is a common one.
Turn one Teemo.
Turn one Teemo. I was going to say turn 4 TF into a Mystic Shot happens all the time.
Like it gets Mystic Shotted. Their TF gets Mystic Shotted and then they concede?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I didn't realize the extent of the tilt culture that
People
was
do this all the
ingrained in
time. Like
people's
they're
heads.
just like, well, that was my entire deck. It's like, I hope it wasn't. Like, and like that, I know for a fact, like there were 3 games. So out of the 13 games I played to get to 137 LP over the past, it was over the course of a day. 3 of those games I remember specifically. I don't remember what I did, but I did something, and then they tanked for a while. They like roped almost all the way down, and then they conceded. And I sat
Are you
there
sure they
like,
didn't time out?
they definitely didn't time out because it didn't even reach the end. And I sat there thinking, thank God I had no idea how I was going to win that game.
Yeah, it happens so often.
You're looking down at your hand and you're like, two of these cards do nothing. One of these cards costs 3 more. Like, I can't cast this card for 3 more turns. Another card is like fine, but like that's not going to win me the game. Like,
I can't stop thinking of poker analogies. Like that's how it feels when you just like put all your chips in with stone nothing, and then they're just like and then they muck it. They're like you had trip aces. And
had
you're
it
like
all.
I had a 3.
Just playing the board.
Yeah.
yep, I bluffed into you with king high, and you shipped your set of kings. Like I don't.
Yeah, whatever's going
That
on.
one's not a.
That was a bad example,
Yeah, it was a bad
but like,
example, but,
yeah, because King High is also a set of kings. Yeah, exactly. Or at
Yeah,
least a
that
pair.
doesn't work at all.
Whatever.
Anyway.
my personal favorite concession I've ever seen, for personal reasons, was somebody. I played a game where I was playing Draven Swain, and I had like 1 static shock in my deck or whatever, and some guy spent 4 mana for Wiggly Burblefish on 1 turn, and then 4 mana for Wiggly Burblefish on another turn, and then I static shocked them, and he instantly conceded. He conceded so fast I couldn't even take a screenshot, and I really wanted to, but that was my personal favorite concede.
One thing I will note, if you're playing the Turbo Lab and your opponent plays turn 1 Aurelion Soul, I do think it might be reasonable to concede.
For example.
Well, when
I
the
forgot
games
about
last
that.
an average of 30 seconds, I think that's fine.
Well,
We're
everyone
done.
just like jumps into lab and scoops to get their quest XP. So,
Yeah.
That's another thing. I mean, and like this is mostly true for ranked, and like it's your prerogative to concede whenever you want, like especially in unranked.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it.
Yeah. But like,
I will gladly be the benefactor of
I've had a
your
good
LP.
amount of concessions trying to test Lee Aphelios on unranked, and people just like see that I'm playing champion Lee Sin and just concede,
Just
and I'm
pick 'em
like,
up.
just want to test, man.
Yeah, that's why you gotta. That's why you gotta in-house test. Like you can't.
Yeah.
Normals is not a good place to test.
Speaking
I
of
mean,
which,
but-
I think we're going to be doing some in-house testing scrimmages this weekend in our Discord. So if you want to get any practice in before the seasonal tournament, you don't want to do it on ladder, then we'll be organizing them in our Discord. So feel free to check that out. The link will be in the description below wherever you're
We could set
listening
up
to
a little
this.
bracket. That'd be fun.
Yeah, it'd be a blast. All right. And with that, I think let's get into our listener questions for this week. We got a good few. So
Start with the question of the week.
let's start with our question of the week. This one comes from, can I get a drum roll, please? Dragon in the Discord. They ask, if you had the power to buff one card, what card would it be, and what would be the buff? Let's start with Hugh. You're raising your hand. I was going to go to you anyway.
Okay, well, I just needed to make sure.
Stoked.
It's karma. It's karma. It needs
We're
to
gonna
be
make it
karma.
like 1 mana.
I just had that moment in class where the other kids' hands shoot up directly in front of you, and then they say exactly what you were going to say.
Yeah, that's why I needed to go first, because one of you was going to say karma, and I couldn't have that because it's my
It's your
absolute
thing. Yeah, it's
favorite
your
card.
baby, yeah.
It's just my favorite card. It's.
How would you buff it? What
I
would you
don't know. I'd make her not. What is she? 6 mana right now?
do? She used to be 5.
I know she used to be 5. She dies to get excited. She dies. How many removal spells in this game
She'd
does
be
she
a lot
die
better
to?
if she was a 4/4.
Get excited, gotcha, aftershock. Okay, those are all PNZ.
I would take her at a 1/4. She can be a 6 mana 1/4 instead of a 6 mana 4/3.
Interesting, really. You think that would be a buff?
I don't know if it would be a buff, but I'd rather not have her die to get excited.
Okay, that's pretty fair. All right, Noble. Have you thought of another answer yet?
No, but I am going to answer the way that I was going to just add. It's a year ago. The pandemic hasn't happened enough. Heimerdinger's 3-cost turn has elusive.
Karma's
Karma
5
costs
mana.
5 mana. Ezreal deals 2 damage no matter what spell it is. Life is
The grass
good.
is greener.
Life is good.
Yeah, everything, the sky's
You know?
just a little brighter.
Aphelios and Lee Sin haven't come out yet. If that's your
Everyone's
cup of
just
tea.
got a pep in their step.
Targon doesn't exist at all, which
Yeah,
is like
you
really
can-
like
you
we're
don't
all
have to
for
play
it.
around Pale
Days,
Cascade.
yeah.
No hush.
And then your favorite card gets put up a mana, and all of the decks die. I really just want to talk about Karma for just a second. Like Aphelios
go ahead.
exists, and he's making guns every turn. Lee Sin exists for 5 mana, and he's like ending the game. Karma doesn't like really do anything that impressive.
She doesn't do anything
until you're enlightened. Like, just let her be a value engine at 5 mana. She can just go back to 5 mana.
She
It's
can
not
go
that
back
hard.
to 5 mana. Also, she does literally nothing when she comes down. Like, yes, at the end of the round, she'll make a random spell.
Do you know how many times
from
that's
your
been like
regions.
Poro Cannon?
You know how many times that's been?
I don't think I've ever cast Karma while Poro Cannon was a card that existed. But Ritual of Renewal.
Yeah, or like.
Do you know how
health
many times
potion.
I've gotten the what's it called? The
Sunpork's map?
poison puff cap card. 1 mana make 5 puff caps?
Yeah.
No.
That's a bad card.
And you know what? At the end of when she's enlightened, it's okay.
I've
I'll
killed
take
someone
it.
with that.
We all have, I think, probably.
I hope
right?
so. It's a
Puff caps,
fulfilling
yeah.
experience. Yeah, I highly recommend
And it's fine because she's enlightened and life is good at that point.
Yeah,
Because
you don't
she's
really- you don't
alive
really ever lose,
somehow
yeah.
because she never lives ever.
That's another thing. Like those, and like also, would Rasa at 7 mana really be game breaking right now? Would Eledros at 8? Like I know we probably don't want that, but the game has gotten a lot more powerful. Power creep
has,
is real,
yeah.
people. It's real.
It is real. It is real. All right, I've my answer is a little bit different. Mine is Karina Varaza. I just want to make her
Okay.
cheaper. I want her to be
1
8
mana cheaper?
I want her to be 8 mana.
You want to be 8 mana?
Oh,
I really like that card. I think she's a really cool control finisher. She like does a powerful, unique thing. But she's just like, I don't know, those decks, like the PNZ controlled style decks, just aren't really all that good. And I don't really see a reason to do that instead of like swaying Leviathan. So if it was the same mana cost as the Leviathan and like immediately dealt with the board, maybe you'd play it.
Yeah. I actually have a real answer, and I think that is going to be Navori Conspirator.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Wow.
That card was a 2/3 maybe back to being a 3/2. I don't know if in the context of, or maybe just Shadow Assassin getting an extra power. All of these things
back
we
to
go
the old Shadow Assassin.
There's a lot of reverts we're talking about.
Like we joke a lot about how Ionia is like the counterspell region because like literally every single meta report, it's like the two most played cards are Deny and Nopify in that order, and it just has been true for forever. I remember when the most played cards were a 4/3 Solitary Monk and a 2/2 Shadow Assassin because all of the decks were Ionia because the best 3-drops were Ionia, and you were playing these cool elusive cards. Like, I don't want to go back to elusives being the best thing ever, but a couple buffs to the elusive things to give Ionia back more of its like tempo-y region identity. Like, look at Navori Conscriptor. It's a 2-mana 3/2 elusive. That's what it was. It's a 2-mana 2/2 elusive that returns an ally to your hand. That you have to return an ally to your hand. That card stacks up pretty poorly against Wiggly Burblefish. Like, I think it would be okay.
It's like significantly worse than the Flight.
Yeah, it's
currently.
Like,
Yeah, currently, yeah.
it's worse than like you could play Sparklefly instead.
Yeah, it's so much worse than
Because
Sparklefly. Are you kidding me?
Targon can make it give it +1/+1 in its sleep. Like there's just a million things to it's
and what's it called? The Night
Kinku Lifeblade versus Sparklefly
It's
also
a funny one.
It's
Yeah.
just heinous.
The Night Stalker, like oh god, I can never remember what the 2-drop 2/3 that gets elusive when
Lunari
Shade Stalker. I can never remember what that card is called. That's another one. Like that card is Navori Conspirator going back to being a 3/2 looks pretty
Totally
even
fine.
against that card.
Yeah, admittedly,
like,
that
I would
one-
just really like.
Yeah,
I
and
know
that one
people hate
has
elusives,
Nightfall, but-
and like people did not like that elusives were the best thing to be doing for quite a while in the game. But
But you like elusives.
I do like elusives.
So
Yeah,
screw those
and this
people.
is what I want to be buffed, not what Reddit wants to be buffed. And the answer is Navori Conspirator.
All right, Bates asks, how often do you like to put surprise cards into your deck? I have been running a 1 of Judgment in Fiora Shen. It's won me a couple of games because nobody expects it.
I believe the technical term is spicy one of.
Oh, that is absolutely the technical term.
Yeah, and
How-
we
how's
like
your-
spicy one ofs here. I think
I like a little bit
I
of
think
spice
we're
in my deck.
generally
as
a fan of the
next guy.
spicy one.
it depends on what it is. I like the judgment.
I am
Judgment's a good
notably
one.
critical of spicy one ofs. So I think if you want to get your spicy one of like approved, like you gotta get it by me because I will tell you your spicy one of is bad if it's really bad.
I mean,
the one
I
of
think-
Judgment in Fiora Shen.
You'll tell them.
All right,
You'll tell
I'm here
people their
for it.
spicy one of is bad if it's good.
Okay, that's
That
also
one's
potentially true.
Yeah. And that's okay because it's usually bad, but hence the term spicy one of,
Yeah.
not good one of that you put in your deck.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to put that many spicy one ofs into my deck because my spicy one ofs are always like some weird expensive spell, and then
Mind meld.
if it's like if it's an aggressive deck, I just cut it for Captain Farron, and then it's not spicy anymore.
Yeah, no, it's just good. It's just
Throwback
value.
to when I put, I think it was Vengeance in.
Oh yeah.
In the Grand Plaza Ephemeral deck. I was just so tired of losing to Fiora and mostly the Freljord Fiora decks that I was just like, I'm just putting Vengeance in my dang deck, guys.
And then he did.
It was bad.
Not gonna lie, this entire time I thought that deck ran Vengeance.
The
The Hecarim one?
yeah.
Really?
No,
just
no,
doesn't
it
just
doesn't have
the
removal
Vengeance?
spells. Nope.
Oh.
I mean,
No
they have the
removal
Grand
spells.
Plaza. That's
I know
removal.
they have the Grand Plaza. Just in my head, it just has Vengeance in it.
Yeah. Nope.
Yeah,
So-
okay.
Nope.
So, anyways, in general, I approve of the spicy one ofs. I don't go actively seeking them. I don't like look at my deck and be like, now what's the spicy one of I play here? Especially because the seasonal tournaments are open deck lists usually, where you get to like
Yeah,
see
that
your
is a
opponent's deck
big.
list.
But that's actually sometimes upside because you're like, okay, now I'm playing.
they have to respect
They have
it.
to
Yeah,
play around
they
the
do.
one Vile Feast in my TF Go hard deck. That's an upside.
It's a
for
real
sure.
thing sometimes. They're like the one of Hushes were definitely a thing a little bit ago before Hush was
everyone
so
was like,
prevalent.
"Ugh."
Yeah.
So
I mean, I really like Judgment as one of the examples because like that's it's an incredibly high impact card that like at a certain point in the game you can't
does just
afford.
win you the game.
It does win you
sometimes,
the
yeah.
game sometimes. At a certain point you can't afford to not respect it because the game's gone long enough that the odds that they have it in their hand is reasonable.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah, and
Judgment and Demacia decks in general, not just Fiora Shen. Like I've gotten.
Oh yeah, no, Judgment's just
Judgment
like,
is a huge.
it's one of the
blowout
most like.
Oh, my favorite Judgment moment is I was like very much winning a game as TF Zoe, and then my opponent like blocked Judgmented with their like Great Beyond that had lost Spell Shield and was like a 9/5.
Oh god.
And I was like, oh, well, I guess that's killing me next turn. And then I looked down at my 9 mana, and then I cast Spell Thief, took the Judgment that was on the stack,
Yeah.
and then Judgmented back to kill his 9/5 before it killed my board, and then killed him. That one was a good
That's
time.
sick.
Yeah, I'm glad that we eventually did find out that spell being on the stack does allow you to spell thief it.
I like that because it feels like a flavor win.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
I
it
want to be
does.
able to steal your spell.
They
You're
have to.
casting.
They're like deny your thing, and you're like, nope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
Absolutely. So Old Man Sands asks, how are you finding the new PvE lab? So we've touched on it briefly, but like, oh yeah, it's great.
It's awesome.
It's so much fun.
Did they mean the like 2v
No, they meant they meant the
dungeon run?
I
The dungeon
assume
run?
they mean
Yeah.
the dungeon run mode.
Love it. Yep.
Yeah. It's just so much fun. It's such a fun game mode. It's so different.
because that's the only one that's PVE.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's so different from
I always
everything
think
else.
E means everyone, but it means environment.
I never actually knew it meant environment. I just knew it meant not other people.
I thought it
Yeah.
meant enemy, but
I don't know what it means. That's definitely a quick Google search away,
All
and
right,
I do not. I'm
got
not
you.
gonna do it. Okay, thank
okay.
you.
No, we'll do the quick Google search. How's that? How are none of us confident on this?
Well, because it doesn't really matter what it means. We all know what it
That's
means.
true. Yeah.
Like when someone says PVE, you know what they're talking
Player
about.
versus environment.
Okay, cool.
versus
That makes
environment.
perfect sense.
Yeah, I totally believe that. The new lab is so fun. I really hope that they continue to support it.
Oh, yeah.
and we get to get like more expansions and more content and stuff. I'd love to be able to do like a co-op mode.
Yeah.
With this type of a thing, I would
Yeah.
love if they made like co-op bosses.
It also
and
pulls
the
in new
dungeon run
players. Like
thing.
it's a really good. It's an amazing thing for people who are new to the game or people who don't care about ranked, just more casual players. Like it's just a really fun thing to do, and that's just a very necessary thing to have in a game like this.
Couldn't agree more. All right, Sad Stove asks, when trying to climb, is it better to focus on one tricking or playing a few top tier decks? So I guess I'll start. I think that it's better to one trick. If your full goal is to gain as much LP as possible as quickly as possible, I think that you will have the best win rate playing only one deck as long as that deck remains good. Right? Like if you get to a point where you're confident that that deck is no longer good anymore, then you should switch because you're probably going to take a small dip in your win rate for
10 games
10
or
or
so?
20 games
Yeah.
or whatever while you learn the new deck, but over time you'll end up with a better win rate when you need to switch because obviously switches need to be made occasionally, frequently even. So I think stick to a deck for as long as you can is my advice, and change hesitantly.
Yeah. The ideal example of this, and I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, is last season when I was trying to make Masters for the seasonal tournament, or tried to get to enough LP and Masters for the seasonal tournament. I was playing TF Go Hard, and then I played. Then I switched to Feel the Rush because I was noticing a lot of decks try to play on Go Hard. And then I played the Feel the Rush Mirror like 4 out of like 6 games, and then I switched to Fiora Shen, and then just rolled like 7 games in a row to make it to the cutoff and then be able to stop.
Yeah, there are some times where you need to read to make a quick swap and like really hit the meta. At
Especially in Masters, like there are like what? There aren't even only around 700 people in NA Masters like right now.
Yeah.
And so if only 100 of them, like a seventh of them being on at the same time would be a lot. So
yeah, it would definitely.
So
be
it's
a lot.
probably
There's
only
24
like
hours in a day, right?
yeah, it's probably only like 50 people on at a time, and so you're just gonna run into the same people more than once. Like if you just start seeing a pattern emerging, like you're probably playing like you're playing against other people who are seeing a similar thing to you.
Yeah,
and so you can just kind of adapt in the moment to stuff like that.
I actually think that that's a good point. When you actually get to like Masters or high rank, I actually think that the answer becomes playing a few top tier decks, because I think that by the time you're there, the players you're playing against are really good. Presumably, you're also really good because you're in that same bracket, right? And so you really do, I think, gain larger percentage points by having an advantageous matchup than you do by being really familiar with your deck. And you'll gain points with both. And as long as you're reasonably familiar with your deck, you've played enough games to not be on that first 10 games where you don't really know how to play your deck, kind of like honeymoon period, then you actually probably will have a higher win rate in higher ranks of play by switching between a couple decks and trying to find advantageous matchups. But I think if you're trying to slog through the ranks until you get to Masters, I think probably
I think that's only true of I think that's only true of a higher end of Masters.
Yeah, I think it's not true in lower end Masters.
Yeah,
too.
I think if you're sub 100 LP in Masters, still one trick. One tricking is the best way to go, as long as I think there are a few requirements, I think, for whatever deck you're playing to be the one you pick. I think that the most important thing is average game time to be no more than 10 minutes. For the sake of grinding, if your average game time is 25 minutes, don't do that to yourself.
Yeah. Actually, I've never actually taken the time to think about how long a game of Legends of Runeterra actually is.
I know from Mobalytics,
10 minutes pretty short. So what is an average game time? I actually don't even know.
My average game time has been 9 minutes for the last 7 months.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
That has not changed.
Even playing some Anivia?
I play a lot of control decks. I play a lot of aggro decks, and I guess I just consistently balance out at 9 minutes.
That also just kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and that's why I say 10 minutes is a good spot
10,
because discard aggro games can take 2 minutes, and Anivia games can take 30 minutes, and a lot of I do find that most of my games take around the longer, a quote unquote long game is 15 minutes, and a short game is 7. It's really what it feels like. I haven't timed it out, but
yeah, totally.
Interesting. All right. So Cloud Aisha asks, with the power level of champs like TF, Zoe, and Aphelios, would you say that value or engine-based champions, value/engine-based champions tend to be stronger than the other types?
No. I think that I would say that because I do think those champions are stronger than most other champions. I don't know if it's something inherently about being value champions, quote unquote. I just think it's important to note that those are the champions that when you play them have the largest effect on the game. So Garen is just an above rate 5-drop. The same is true for honestly Draven. It's an above rate 3-drop. Same is true of Riven most of the time. And so when an Aphelios crushes you over 6 turns, you're my God. But when Draven just is much better than any other 3-drop in the game would have been, it's not quite as obvious. And I think that I just wanted to point out that little
yeah, no, you're totally right. Yeah.
A way that we look at a card and what might say some were really powerful. I mean, that's a reason a lot of people hate Lee Sin. It's not really because he wins more games than a champion should. It's because every time the reason they lose the game is Lee Sin. It's even if they were going to lose that game, if they had a different card, if they found some different way to kill you, they would have built their deck so that it still killed you.
The reality of the fact of that Lee Sin deck is that a lot of the time that deck's just so far ahead from their early Zoe plays that it didn't really matter what their plan to kill you was. Any plan to kill you would have been good enough. It just happens to be Lee Sin.
And also, I think a bigger reason people hate that deck is that it wins games that pretty much any other deck shouldn't really ever win. It really steals. When it steals a game, it really steals a game.
It could do some
You've got
bullshit,
your board full of 8/8s, and then they just go with nothing in play. They just have 4 cards in hand. They go Lee Sin, Gem,
Zenith Blade.
Lee Sin spell attack you, or Zenith Blade has to be one of those, obviously.
Lee Sin,
and then
Gem,
they just
Zenith
kill
Blade,
you, and because you're 12 or something, right? And it doesn't even need to be big.
Yeah, you really don't need much more.
Also, there's a facet to this question that I want to address real quick is what are the other types of champions?
I think that so for me, I think TF Zoe and Aphelios are the I would classify them as the mid-range versatility
just
sort of
value
champions. They're the value champions. I think comparing them to Lee Sin would be a combo champion. I think Aurelion Sol is maybe technically a value champion, but more game ending than that. So probably a game ending threat. Like Anivia is like a game ending threat. Like there's champions that are game ending threats. I would even put Karma into the game ending threat category because she's so much worse at generating value, but is so unbeatable at 10 mana.
Yeah.
And then I think there's just the tempo oriented champions like Draven, Teemo, Jinx, Darius, Hecarim, the ones that are like trying to kill you dead. Basically, I think that the thing about these champions is that like these champions are not going to kill you with the text that they have innate. Like you're not going to die
Zoe
to
does
Twisted
not-
Fate attacking
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
You're going to die to
Him flipping.
him flipping and him
Generating
generating
on-
value,
yeah.
right? You're going to die to the slew of cards that come after the Twisted Fate because he beat you so bad on tempo or card advantage or whatever. I think that's kind of the distinction they're trying to get at.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually tend to think of champions in one of... I split champions in my head into two types of champions. Champions that you care about flipping and champions that you don't. Draven being a great example of one you don't. Ezreal being a good example of one you do. Though Ezreal's a little in the middle because like his front side can just be like good. But TF is definitely a champion, at least in recently how it's been played.
Yeah, he actually switched.
Yeah,
I
he
think.
went from being one that you didn't really care about flipping in like the Swain deck.
Yeah,
TF
the Swain decks or even the Go Hard decks, they flipped him occasionally, but
Yeah, they
It
weren't trying
It
to
wasn't.
It
It
wasn't
wasn't
a
the
lot.
priority. It was really the threat of flipping that was more
totally.
important.
Into ones that don't care as much about flipping. And just because I think that they function differently as cards, like there are decks that these decks are a Zoe deck. They're an Aphelios deck. They really resolve around making that champion as good as possible. And then there are decks that Darius is in. Like, do you
or
know what I mean?
Elise. Just the card
Elise. Elise is a great example.
That card
that
does
deck
not
is
flip.
a TF deck. It is not an Elise deck.
The only
I
time
mean,
you
it has
ever
Elise
flip
in it.
Elise is when you play Crawling Sensation.
Yeah, and like even when you do it, she doesn't always win you the game. Like
Yeah, and even then, she's usually
she's
just
an
fine.
on rate.
Yeah.
She's just an on rate beater. The same is true of Garen. The same is true of Quinn. Actually, I think
Definitely. Whereas
Darius-
Misfortune is a card that you're planning to flip.
depending on what deck you're playing.
In the like the Scouts deck or whatever.
Yeah, in the
Whereas
Pirates
Quinn,
deck,
I don't think you're
she's
really
the other version. She's just a good 3-drop.
Yeah, exactly. Which is also interesting that she can have that distinction in the two decks. Whereas like in the Scouts deck, I think that she is trying to flip.
You're not
Whereas in
attacking with her. You're trying to play.
Whereas
have her
in the
play all your
Pirates deck,
Scouts.
like I'm always attacking with my Misfortune. Like if my opponent's gonna block and spend all their mana to use a combat trick, then great. Like I'm hitting them with my other things. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
totally.
Super interesting. All right. Our last question for the episode comes from Tede. They ask, how do you think variations of Burble handle the new Aphelios meta? Is Fizz TF still the best variant, or do more value-oriented decks like Zoe TF have a better time handling the card churn from Aphelios?
Hot take time. I think TF Zoe was always the best variant. TF Fizz was never the best variant.
Until the nerfs.
I do think the nerfs did really hurt TF Zoe, which is sad.
I only played the deck post nerf, and I could feel every single time when I played
I think that Pale Cascade nerf is so big.
for that particular deck.
Yeah, I really feel it.
Yeah, definitely. There's just you just have so many poorly statted creatures that like trading up with your the most frequent example I can think of is always Mentor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Making your Mentor
of the Stones
3/2
trades every time. It feels so good every time
Yeah.
when Mentor trades.
Exactly. And I
Well,
now
just
I
like,
think
like just being like getting play 2 to just like kill your opponent when they would have gone to 4. Like there's just a lot of times.
the deck always operated on very, very thin margins, and
You really feel them.
yeah,
Totally.
Yeah. So anyway, the original question: what do you think of the Aphelios Burblefish meta, Hugh? Do you think that Burblefish is got the tools, or do you think Aphelios decks are here to eat them alive?
So I think that this is a question that will be better answered next week. However, for now, given the amount, I've played a decent amount of this matchup because I just started like jamming TF Fizz again on ladder. And before I went on like my 10 game tear, like my win streak, I played a decent amount into the deck, and I never. I'm going to say at the absolute worst, the matchup's 50-50, but for now I think I think TF Fizz is favored into Aphelios.
Yeah.
And when I say Aphelios, I'm saying Aphelios Victor is the most common deck I've been seeing.
Cool.
Burblefish is just kind of inherently line up against like slow speed removal spells, especially when like they just don't happen that often. Like, it's hard for them to line it up. Like, they're not going to have Calibrum every turn. Like, that the champion just can't do that.
Yep.
Gravitum is annoying and not a huge deal, and especially like, yeah, and like if you have enough removal in the TF Fizz deck that you can often burn out the recipient of lifesteal. That can be really important.
There's also just like a lot of like get excited to like point at Aphelios. So Aphelios doesn't really take over the game that frequently against the Burblefish decks. He's far more often just a like 1 or 2 weapon Aphelios.
Using 2 cards to kill your card that replaced itself is never a great.
It doesn't feel great, but it can be fine.
For what it's worth, the list that I have been playing, I don't know if you guys feel this is right, but it feels right to me. The list no longer runs any copies of Aftershock.
I've seen
currently,
that
and maybe we'll go back to running Aftershock with Veiled Temple being a good card, as it turns out.
I think that the Burblefish deck's plan has, I think, very much is more than happy to ignore that Veiled Temple card.
Same. I agree with that, and we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
The stress testing is very, very good in that deck.
You'd much rather spend the punish them for wasting and make them waste the 4 mana up front than use 4 mana of your own to trade with it. I think
so too.
I think
and
that's your plan.
We will see, and I really do think that Aphelios deck lists need to settle, and people need to like flesh them out.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to do. This champion pairs well with. I just saw a new version like, while checking our thing for our Discord for questions.
Yeah, of course.
Of Lux, of like where Aphelios Lux. Like that's a good combo.
Sick.
Like
I forgot about that.
It works with Lee Sin because you're casting spells.
Can I get my buff answered back? I want Lux, that champion. Make it playable. I don't know how. I don't care how.
Maybe Aphelios is the answer.
Lux.
I do love Lux.
Lux is like my favorite champion in Expedition.
But the champion works with like
to be good. Anyway,
it creates cards. Those cards target things. One of those cards stuns things. So like Yasuo's in the mix, Ezreal's in the mix.
I saw
Zoe, Lee Sin. Like there's just so many.
Aphelios deck.
Victor, like there's just so many different possible applications for the champion because he's so versatile and he just does a lot of things. Like he just like creates cards in your hand.
Yeah,
he
and I think
creates spells. He's
making the best Aphelios deck, or potentially even the second best Aphelios deck that is almost as good but doesn't use like Twisted Fate or whatever, is going to be a critical part of the seasonal tournament this season.
Something that I do want to mention. It's
going to be a really important part.
Yeah, something I do want to mention. Noble, you mentioned Yasuo, and I just really quickly thought, people stop playing that card.
Okay, but that Aphelios now Yasuo deck looks so sweet. Though.
I've played against. It's like, what do you? Stop. He's not good.
He's really not that good.
No, I mean
he's really good.
No, I mean
the trend will hold, and it will be the best deck next week, and then we'll talk about it when we're talking about what decks to play. And
I still like. Yasuo. Has Yasuo ever been good?
No, never.
Cool.
He used to be like a 3/4 right? Like,
no, he used to be a. He used to be a 5 mana. He used to be 5 mana 4/4, and then they buffed him to a 4 mana 4/4. And I was like, maybe this is the buff, and it still wasn't, because he still doesn't do anything.
It turns out stun is just not that good. Like
it is
really good, but it can't be your main plan.
Adding 2 damage to your stuns is weirdly not.
Yeah, because you don't want to stun the small things, and
you want to stun the big things,
and then that doesn't kill him. It's like 2 damage. Who cares?
Yeah, and then like your Yasuo flipping is like good, but like,
and if you're playing Aphelios, you have to play Ravenous Flock.
And stun is a tempo keyword, not a control keyword. Like, I think anyway.
Mid range, I mean,
anyway,
yeah. I think that deck has potential, but it's.
I'm not going to say it doesn't have potential,
good.
But like, oh my god, Yasuo is so currently bad.
He's so currently bad, yeah. Alrighty, so I think that brings us to the end of our listener questions. Do either of you guys have anything you want to say to wrap up the episode?
I feel like we should quickly just summarize the main topic a little bit.
Yeah,
I think I feel like the main points that we want to really drill into people's head about, if you want to improve to a competitive level and just in a fundamental way, make sure you can hold yourself accountable for your mistakes. Like, acknowledge that you made mistakes. Don't take it to the point where you make yourself feel bad for doing something that was bad. Like, don't be like, oh, I'm such a garbage player. And at least if you're saying that, be like,
at least be able to joke with yourself.
Like, the amount of times I say to myself, God, I'm trash.
Oh,
like,
yeah, that is a daily occurrence for all of us.
At least 5 times a game, probably. Like, I'm like,
even that's the experience of growth and learning that we're looking to cultivate on the Champs Life podcast.
And it doesn't even necessarily mean I did something wrong. I'll just like something will have happened that was completely out of my control. I'm just like, I'm trash. Like, I suck at this game.
I'll be on Discord with my friends and I'll like misclick on when I'm trying to get my Poro to stick out his tongue. I'm like, I suck at the game.
Yeah,
You know?
like it's just dumb things like that too. Yeah, exactly. So that's a big part of it. Don't focus on winning. Focus on improving, and the wins will come once you improve.
Yeah.
That's another big part of it. I don't know if there's another aspect that we want to quickly touch on.
Yeah, just we talk a lot about like mental gameplay. You play the game because it's fun. Remember that you should be having fun, and look to broaden your horizons both by talking to other players that might think about the game differently than you. Which is something
that's a big thing. New perspectives on
perspectives
things.
are huge.
Really big deal.
Echo chambers are a huge issue when you're talking with anyone about good things.
Really mostly anything.
Yeah, anything really. Like that's a huge problem with just like Reddit or Reddit's a big issue.
Twitter even too.
Yeah,
like you just like get on Legends of Runeterra Twitter or League Twitter or Magic Twitter, and it's just like very insular.
You just get
like
sucked
one
in.
person says like this card's broken, another person's like yeah, totally, and then everyone just piles on.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
card's
and
nonsense.
Every
it needs
time
to be
you
nerfed.
lose to it, you're on Reddit posting about the shuffler and
Oh yeah.
40 years from
I'm
now.
convinced that shuffler conspiracies are the QAnon of card games.
This I will say that the amount of times it really always it's definitely not actually true, but it feels suspicious every time. Every time you mulligan away.
Yeah, I already knew what it was going to be
cards,
because
and then you get back the
absolutely
exact same
suspect,
two cards in the exact same order. Is too many times.
There's no way the math works like that, right? Like
No,
it can't
it's
be possible.
There's 40 cards in my deck. How is that happening every time?
Fix your game, right?
I mean, all right. Yeah. So we are off for a week of stress testing. See, I worked that one in.
Excellent.
Did you cue that up beforehand? Or did you
I thought of it like 30 seconds ago. So
Oh, wow.
I'm glad we managed to fit
Okay,
it in.
so a lot of restraint.
That's what I bring to the podcast mostly. It's,
30 second
swole
stale
scroll
joke.
references. Yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be I think there's going to be a lot of testing. So obviously we're going to be focusing a lot on the seasonal tournament coming up. Next week's episode is going to be entirely about the testing we've been doing.
Because it comes out the day before the seasonal tournament.
Yeah, the testing we've been doing. I plan on writing another article about the Last Chance Gauntlet. I wrote one for the last one. It seemed pretty well received. So I'm definitely going to be doing that again. So be sure to keep an eye on that. If you're following our Twitter will certainly tweet that out. It'll be in the Discord as well. Make sure you join that. The link for that is in the description. I mentioned that we're going to be trying to organizing like scrims or, organized games, maybe like a bracket of some kind to try and get practice in for the seasonal tournament. So if you're interested in participating in any of that, once again, join the Discord. We'll be talking about that this weekend tentatively, but even if you just don't want to be part of anything organized or you just want somebody to play a scrim with there's usually people that are around that are going to want to play because
there's a
think
very
all of
good
us are looking for
chance
practice.
that knowing us, we're not going to actually organize like an
Like a real
organized thing.
Yeah,
We're just going to be
yeah.
like, we're just going to hop on Discord and be like, who wants to test? And then we'll just test.
Almost certainly, yeah.
And which is fine. Like I'm down to do that.
Yeah, we
probably.
need some testing. So anyway, I want to thank you all for listening to this week's episode of Champ Select. And I think with that, we will see you all in next week's episode.